Our scripture reading this morning, if you want to follow along, is on page 838 of your pew Bibles. From the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verses 20 through 31. The themes that we're talking about are blessings and woes and love for enemies. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of me. Rejoice in that day, and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven. For that is what their ancestors did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you."
I grew up in a small town in east central Wisconsin where mostly people know one another's business. There's over 4 decades, a man in that small town, humble, quiet, a little bit socially awkward, unmarried, ran a really small dry cleaning business. He went everywhere by bike or by foot, belonged to the Methodist Church, was a member of several civic organizations. He lived a very simple life. 6 weeks ago, he died at the age of 66. People came to his visitation and his funeral, and then they went on with their lives. And several weeks later, whoever showed up got an envelope in their mailbox with a check for $1,870. And a small note that said, "If you're doing okay financially, pass this on. Do something for somebody who's struggling." The phone started ringing off the hook. "Did you get one? Is this a joke? This must be a mistake." The weekly newspaper interviewed the man's siblings, the surviving siblings. And it said, "No joke. We're fine with it. No surprise at all. It's who our brother was. This man named Dennis Volstead. Turns out, very frugal life, and he accumulated a good sum of money. Gave very generously to his local church and to lots of organizations in the area. And he had instructed in his will the last $500,000 will be equally distributed among all of those who show up and sign the guest register at my funeral." Dennis was not rejected or reviled. He didn't make any particular political waves. He wasn't poor or hungry. He went to work every day steaming dress shirts and slipping skirts on hangers. He went to church every Sunday and to Kiwanis every Tuesday and waved at people as he rode his bike in all kinds of weather. He was consistent on the trail of life decisions day after a day that pointed to an end where they said, there's no surprise here. That's who Dennis was. In a different time, in a different place, there was a whole crowd of people following Jesus down the hill to a flat place. Not just the 12 apostles who had just been appointed, or those who have been following him for some time now. People who came, who were just curious. People who came from other regions. People who were even non-Jews. And they gathered around. And he looked up and he set his gaze particularly at first upon those who've been traveling with him, his group of disciples. And he said to them, essentially, you've given up quite a bit to be on this journey with me, to be part of this vision of God's inbreaking. Sometimes your stomach growls. Even some of you were quite successful small business owners. You're still hungry. Sometimes your heart hurts of what you've given up in your life commitments and relationships to be here. And then sometimes people cuss you out and discredit you because of the decision you made to be a part of this movement of something bigger. And then it's as if Jesus also says, and others of you are hungry not because of the decisions you made, but because of your birth circumstances. And people look at you askance, don't they? Why aren't you more involved with your kids' school PTA after you get off of your third part-time job? Why are you always in financial debt? Do you really want to buy chicken wings with that EBT card? All of you, it's as if Jesus says, all of you are recipients of joy right now, connecting to the steady stream of God's abundance and goodness. So pay no mind to what your neighbors whisper on the side about you. Pay no mind to what the conventional wisdom says about what it means to be blessed. Blessed does not mean good-looking, successful, well-connected, white American. Blessed are the immigrant, the unemployed, the lonely, the homeless, the reviled. Blessed are those who make decisions against the grain of convention for the sake of others. And then Jesus says some words that are stinging for many of us. Jesus says, woe to those of you who are comfortable, who have good reputations, who know you're somebody, and think you've made it because of the things that you have or the people you hang with. I guess Jesus is simply making an assessment. And it's really tough to wholly trust grace and holy gifts if we're trusting what we surround ourselves with. It's really tough to be passionately in love with God if we're spending most of our time and most of our energy cultivating everything else around us besides that relationship. From the various early days, the church has named saints of those who were passionately in love with God, even enduring suffering, discomfort, discrediting, and death. I think the first one recorded was from 180 in North Africa. Spiritus. Spiritus stood up and said, I'm not pledging allegiance to empire. I'm pledging allegiance only to holy presence. In 340, Simeon opposed special taxation of Christians under the Sasanian Empire. And then Maximilian was the first conscientious objector. Maximilian, the story goes, when he was ready for execution on that day, his father was off to the side to witness. And he noticed that his executioner had really shabby clothes on. So he instructed his father, take my nice clothes that I'm wearing right now and give it to this man who's about to take off my head. There were people called saints because they endured on their own extreme discomfort, being in the wilderness, fasting for long periods, even standing on pillars in the hot sun. There were mystics who were called saints because they decided to create a different imagination of what it means to follower of God than the conventional, at that time, sort of land-grabbing church convention. There were those who became saints because they defied orthodoxy. Remember the young woman, Perpetua, who was condemned for her understanding of Jesus. And the church years later said, oops, that was wrong. We'll make her a saint. In our tradition, we could say there are people we might call saints as well. A couple of weeks ago, some of us were in a study about the doctrine of discovery, and we learned of a fellow by the name of Samuel Worcester, who grew up in the Northeast, went to Andover Newton Seminary, part of the Congregational Church, and then came on down to this part of the country and began to get to know the Cherokee. Began to get to know their language, began to work with them in lifting up that language, and worked with them in actually creating a regular newsletter of the Cherokee. Well, not too long after that, the state legislature in Georgia, the Georgia governor said, we're going to make some laws to make way for settlers to come in and take over some of the land that was designated for the Cherokee. Well, Worcester did not like that very much, and he and 11 others signed a petition resisting the government of Georgia. And so they were arrested. They were marched over hill and vale to prison. And they said, renounce this petition. Worcester said, no way. He sat in prison until the U.S. Supreme Court had said, we rule in honoring the rights of the Cherokee people. And so he made some concessions so he could go home to nurse his sick wife and continue the struggle for the rights of these people. Well, you know the story. The governor of Georgia and the president of the United States, they said, forget what the U.S. Supreme Court said. We're going to do this anyway. Well, it wasn't long before Samuel Worcester was arrested again and sentenced to 4 years hard labor. Did this man, did this Congregationalist, see the Cherokee as entirely equal in spirituality and cultural status? Maybe not. He was less than perfect. And yet, in his attempt to find solidarity, passionate for the love of the gospel, he endured hardship because this was his value. In fact, all of the saints of the church, all of the saints of our individual and collective lives are pretty imperfect, aren't they? Often the people who have become saints are not those we would have chosen to forward the cause or take a stand or serve in a particular way, but God chooses them. In fact, most of the saints are rather quirky. Many of them were originally drunkards and philanderers and cheats until they saw a different way. Yet they saw a connection with God. And by the power of their love through others, they found it important enough even to sometimes give up comfort and reputation and wealth and great meals and security. So that's probably what Luke's Jesus is underscoring when in the Sermon on the Plain he says, blessed are you who are weeping now, for you will laugh. Leap for joy because you know the real source of your joy. Well, probably most of us are more like Dennis Volstead, the humble man from East Central Wisconsin. Ordinary people who are saints in taking one more step, mostly consistent with what we honor and what we love. And then, very often, forsaking or forgetting or falling down or not getting it right or fudging on our commitment. But then recommitting, getting back up again and saying, This is what I think faithfulness looks like. We're holy because we belong to God. We're holy because we sanctify our own desires, our own unique place in the world. We're holy when we give up the stereotype of what it means to be holy, what it's supposed to look like. We're holy when we stop comparing ourselves to somebody else and accept who we are and the direction into which the Holy One is shaping us, growing ever deeper in love and connection. Malcolm Gia wrote in this little poem called Ordinary Saints some beautiful lines. Gia wrote, "Stretch out a finger, feel along the pole to find the flaw. Touch and search that wound from which the light we never noticed fell into our lives." That's how ordinary people become sanctified in the lives of others. By seeing the radiance under the surface of things, often right on the jagged edge of our woundedness. By holding the strands of somebody else's story with them long enough so that they can stitch together one more piece, as uncomfortable and annoying and as heartbreaking as that can be. By watching the subtle shifts of life across the movements of somebody doing what they do absolutely best. By seeing somebody's face so that they know that the Holy One always sees their face. By not cutting our shapes after the patterns of those who would minimize or condemn us or somebody else. By being, with all of our flaws and all of our creakiness and crankiness, with all of our doubts, to be our own selves, longing to love in the way you and only you have been created. So siblings in the presence, let the presence take your face and hold it and speak into your cheeks today. You are my saint, just the way you are. You are my saint, so remember that as you continue one step after step on this path of consistent dedication to what you think is your life. So that in the end, those who know you will be able to say, "Oh, there's no surprise. That's who they are." Amen.